I'm Dane, and this is Dane Explains. With Thanksgiving being yesterday, if you watch this video the day that comes out anyway, you may still have difficulty buttoning your pants. One of the things we do a lot during this holiday season is eat. That's great, as long as we stick to our New Year's resolutions. When it comes to eating, getting fat isn't the only thing people need to worry about. With all this inflation, recently a lot of people have been squeezed for food. Even so, food is still very abundant in the Western world than most people realize. It didn't used to be this way. Today, when we see someone who is overweight, or even if we get overweight ourselves, we don't usually think much of it besides that we may be a bit unhealthy. Well, in the past, people didn't see fatness as indicating someone is physically unhealthy. They saw it as a sign that someone was spiritually unhealthy. Let me explain why. People in this day and age in the Western world, especially the United States, are so awash in food we forget that eating too much is not only unhealthy, but a sin as well. In the past, when someone was fat, it was a big fat glowing neon sign for most people around them that not only were they rich and selfish, but they were also guilty of the sin of gluttony. People talk about how many poor people can't afford to eat healthy, so they end up getting fat. 200 years ago, poor people were actually poor, like dirt poor. Not to say that there aren't poor people like that today, but they're much more rare, and if you're watching this video, you're probably not one of them. They were so poor back then that the choice wasn't whether they could buy the lean organic hamburger versus the cheap processed hamburger, it was whether they could afford to eat anything at all. Many of the interesting food combinations we have today come from the clever ways people, who had next to nothing for food, figured out how to make the few things they could scrounge together not only work together, but go further. Today, we don't think twice about trimming fat off of something and throwing it away, or throwing out a ham bone at the end of dinner. Not even 100 years ago, this would not have been the norm. Not too long ago, people saved every scrap they could, using the fat and the bone to add flavor to additional things like flavoring soups or stews that consisted mostly, or if not all of, much cheaper vegetables. Growing up, there were a few years my parents had to resort to such things. Just put food on the table after my father was forced to give up his dairy farm due to low milk prices. But we did still eat. We didn't go hungry. Now, just because we don't do these things as often anymore doesn't instantly mean we're gluttons. It just means that we're better off than many people in the past. The vast majority of people had to work hard to get only a little food. This didn't mean that the rich people who didn't have to struggle were instantly gluttons. However, all those hungry people highlighted the sin of gluttony and made it more apparent why it was a sin. Today we've lost sight of why gluttony is actually a sin because food is so abundant, and we don't often have starving people around us all the time to make us feel bad about how much we're eating. The thing is, it's not just that we're eating in excess. While others starve, that makes gluttony a sin, like most people would think. And yes, eating more than we need while we know others are starving is a sin, but we don't often find ourselves in that position these days. It's also that eating in excess in itself is a sin. Like anything, whether it be drugs, alcohol, or food, abusing any of them just to please our senses is a sin. It's much easier to see that's the case with something like drugs, which have more limited uses. So it's easier for us to see when we're going beyond what's necessary. But the same applies for food. Gluttony is also, understandably, a sin that's harder to deal with than drugs or alcohol. We don't need to drink whiskey in order to be alive. So, if we had an addiction to it, we can avoid whiskey and not consume any in order to avoid sinning. We have to eat food to live. And in this day and age, we are surrounded by lots of it too. Not only that, cheap spices have made it taste much better than it did a couple hundred years ago. That makes gluttony probably one of the hardest sins to control after we start to get addicted. So, in spite of the fact that people don't talk about it much anymore, it's probably one of the #1 sins people struggle with these days. Even beyond sins people commit flagrantly these days like fornication and contracepting. So, this holiday season, eat, drink, and be merry. Do as much of the third one as you want, but please do use moderation with the other two. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please press the like button, subscribe to my channel, and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Also, please support me on Patreon, link in the description. The more people support me, the more time I can dedicate to making videos like this one. So, until next time, Have a happy Thanksgiving and a great week.